Hi, this is Growing Grace. I'm James Bell, and we are going through Dr. Ed Wheat's book, Love Life for Every Married Couple. The vision is that this will be a tool to help you in your personal marriage, and then to give you a tool that you can use with your friends. You can read the book. You can take advantage of these 15-minute sessions that are on each chapter. Go through the chapter yourself, and then you can go to the people in your world and say, I've just done something that the Lord has used. My wife and I have just done something. My husband and I have just done something that's transforming our lives. We listened to these videos, we read the book, and have been applying the principles, and we'll never be the same. And so you can mail someone the book, you can point them to the videos, or you can have a home group, or use this in a Sunday school class. A lot of different methods. One of the tragedies of our time is that we have this mindset that only pastors and maybe a few others can do significant work in the church. The biblical model in Timothy is, Paul said to Timothy, what I have taught you, you teach others. You teach faithful men who in turn will be able to teach others. That's what we are desiring, that as we share this and you take it and you apply it, then others will be transformed. I've had the privilege of going through this with couples and then seeing them go through it with others. I was at a church speaking on a particular occasion, and this elderly lady grabbed my shirt and this young man's shirt and pulled us together, and she looked in my face and said, you see that couple over there? This young man, my pastor, guided them through this book, and God changed their life. Well, I'd had the privilege of going through the book with the young man who at that time was far from being a pastor, and yet God revolutionized his marriage and later called him to gospel ministry. So here we are, chapter 3, and a very important question. We've laid the foundation in chapter 2 of the Genesis story of how God has set up and ordained godly marriage. It's his institution, and he has set it up very plainly. It's easy to understand. Here's the plan. You say, but that was before sin. Now we have a sin problem, so maybe God has changed his mind, he's changed his plan. By the way, we did not point this out, but when you look at chapters 2 and 3 in Genesis, there was no provision for divorce. And we get the concept from Genesis and from how Jesus talked about marriage, that this marriage is till death do part. And so one man, one woman for life. But you say, but we're in a time of sin. Surely God doesn't expect that today. Well, Jesus had to deal with that. In chapter 3 of the Love Life book, Dr. Wheat quotes from Mark's gospel and Matthew's gospel, where the Pharisees took Jesus to task on this issue and said, well, you know, Moses gave all these writings for divorce. What do you say about that? Well, Jesus did not enter into their level of discussion. There were many ideas back then, and people had this idea and that one. He didn't join either group. He simply said, well, in the beginning, it was not so. And by the way, Moses did that only because of the hardening of your heart. But in the beginning, it was not so. And he went back and gave them the statement that God had intended for marriage all along. So I realize that many people listening to this, you've already had a divorce. You're in your second marriage, or maybe third. And so how can you apply these principles when you've already got deep scars and deep wounds? Well, you apply it in your present marriage. As I go to the New Testament, I don't find a place where we're exhorted, oh, this is your second marriage, and so God's intention was only one marriage, and so you must divorce your present spouse. The book of Corinthians, the church at Corinth had many, many problems and many moral issues, and obviously then relationships were in a mess. And so there were Christians who became Christians and their spouses were not saved. Holy Spirit led Paul to say, don't break that marriage. You may win them. In that whole passage, there was no instruction of breaking a marriage in order to get right. So you're in your second marriage or third or whatever. To be in a place where God can bless you going forward, you look back wherever there was failure in the past, and I've never met an innocent party. You may be only 10% wrong in what was the failure of your first marriage. You take your responsibility and you ask God's forgiveness. You rest in God's forgiveness. You give forgiveness. And then you commit yourself, Lord, in this present marriage, I'm going to do it your way. My wife and I, my spouse and I, my husband and I, we want to learn God's way to establish a godly marriage. And by the way, I would not want anyone to take my second marriage, a person might say, as an excuse for someone else to be married a second time. Oh, your second marriage is wonderful. That's what we need to do. We need to divorce and get someone else. No. We failed in our first marriage. Our present marriage is not God's pattern. It's an expression of God's mercy. Our second marriage is working because we're doing it God's way. We've cleared our conscience about our failures in the first one. And so you apply the Word of God in your present marriage, and miracles can begin to happen. Now, here's a reason why this is very important. You're going along, and you've got difficulties, and you've got problems, and in a spirit of unbelief, they're insurmountable, and so you say, well, I need a divorce. If you, and Dr. Wheat deals very well with this in this chapter, Does the Plan Still Work? If you have the faintest possibility of divorce in your mind, sort of in your back pocket, and difficulties come along, you won't pay the price that you might have to pay for the healing of a marriage. Dr. Wheat had 2 long years of being and becoming the person God wanted him to be, and he was getting no positive response from his family. I read the story just the other day. The pastor who told about being in his home as a child. His father was also a pastor, and he remembered a particular lady who came often to their home, and she often was crying tears. For 17 years, she lived with an abusive husband. And then he went to a Billy Graham crusade, was converted, and was transformed, and became a godly husband. Some of his workers said, oh, Billy Graham must have preached some message. He said, oh, no, not at all. It was not the message he preached, but the life my wife lived before me for 17 years. There may be times when a person may need to take some refuge. I understand all those things, but a Christian should always remain in a redemptive attitude. It is rare in our time for people to embrace the mindset that, living the Christian life may cause suffering. It may bring about persecution. But if I am persecuted for righteousness' sake, then I'm blessed. If I'm buffeted about for my own faults, there's no joy in that. This is from the New Testament book of 1 Peter. So, I know this is controversial territory, but I'm encouraging you to take this chapter and read it carefully and think in terms of ceasing to think about how you can please yourself, and rather think, Lord, how can I be your servant? How can I be redemptive? How can I be one in whom and through whom the forgiveness of Christ and the love of Christ flows toward those who are unworthy, unloving, and unresponsive? Lord, I'm going to do it as an act of worship to you. I'm going to die to my rights and expectations. I'm going to do all of my responsibilities as an act of worship to you. There's one thing I know. I don't know how the marriage is going to turn out because I don't know what's going to happen in the other person's life. But if you walk that path, you're going to have a peace and a joy that passes all understanding. Have we thought about the fact that life was not easy on the earth for Jesus? He didn't have a lot of people encouraging him along the way. He had a lot of people doing bad things toward him, and yet he never lost his joy. He never lost his peace. He suffered all the way to the cross. It was painful, and yet he never lost his peace or his joy or being pleasing to his Father. And then in the book of Philippians, we're told that because of that path, he is now exalted at the right hand of the Father, and there will be a numberless multitude saved. Who knows who's going to be saved, their eternity changed, because you know that God's plan still works. And you're going to put your hands to the plow as an act of worship to the Lord. I'm going to embrace God's model for marriage in my present marriage and leave the results to Him. By the way, my experience has been very similar to Dr. Wheat's. He indicated that most marriages that are saved or transformed happen because either the husband or the wife, not both, but either one or the other, take God's word and begin to apply it as an act of worship to the Lord and leave the results to Him. It's wonderful if both husband and wife start walking down a road of faith together, but in most cases, one is going faster than the other. Another may be waiting in the shadows. It may be a long time. But if just one, either you as a husband or you as a wife, embrace God's will of His vision of marriage, and you do it as an act of worship to Him, a miracle has already invaded your house. Love will be in your house. Forgiveness will be in your house. These are the greatest weapons. You're in spiritual battle. You say, well, my wife and I are always fighting. My husband and I are always fighting. Well, there's going to be a warfare, but stop using the wrong weapons. Fighting flesh with flesh brings more flesh. Don't point out the flesh of the other person. Just lay down your arms of flesh and die to them and say, Lord, here I am, your servant. I'm flooded with your love. It's been quenched. I'm now available for you to manifest your love through me, unconditionally, sacrificially, forgivingly. I'm going to be one in whom and through whom Christ can be seen. In the closing of this chapter, when sin came, Dr. Wheat points out the obvious. When sin came, selfishness came. When sin came, finger pointing came. When sin came, God says, what's going on here? Well, the woman you gave me, the devil, passing the buck, smoke screening. That's where all that began. Never brings a solution. The solution only comes when I allow the Word of God to be as a mirror and expose my need and transform me more into the likeness of Jesus Christ. And so selfishness can then go out the window. It's very interesting how things change. This book was written in 1980. The Olympics of 1976 had a great story of this young man who won the decathlon. And it was all over the papers and the television, the story of how he and his wife had teamed up to work together for all the training. By the time this book was written, it was stated that they had parted ways to each focus on their own lives. I don't know all the details that happened. But you see, that was just the beginning of their sin. This man's sin so warped him that he has now gone through a sex change and now presents himself as a woman. Very famous. Once upon a time, he was Bruce Jenner, a decathlon winner, masculine, husband of one wife, a great testimony before people. And now the world applauds him or her or whatever, but there's no joy there. And there is an eternity staring them in the face. What began as a little selfishness in their lives that destroyed their marriage has further destroyed their lives. And God only knows how many others. There is no escaping of consequences when we discard or push aside the plan that God has given. God's word is very plain about setting forth, here is my plan for marriage. Embrace it. You say, but my spouse is not doing so. That's not the issue. You embrace it as an act of worship to the Lord, and God will begin to work miracles. The plan still works. Well, that brings the thought that many have, well, love is such a mystery. It's so complicated. And we live in a world where we love ice cream. And the television is talking about love. And there is even a car that has in their advertisement about love. So what is love? We've hinted at it, but the Word of God is very plain about it. And next time, as we continue in the Love Life book, we go beyond asking, does the plan still work? We will go to chapter 4, Love, Solving the Mystery. Look forward to meeting with you on that. God bless you. This is Growing Grace.